Welcome to Nostalgia Alley. We have a very special show. I want to welcome my co-host, the lovely Joan Delaloy, wife and partner and co-host. We were able to get her on the show. It's hard to afford your race, but I'm glad you came. And we have a wonderful subject on everybody's mind, navigating the workplace. Joan, introduce our guest.
Thank you, Mike. What a great pleasure it is to have Susan Dowell with us. Susan is co-author of a wonderful new book called Workplace Genie, who, with her co-author Natalie Canavore, provides us with an unorthodox toolkit to help transform your work relationships and get the most from your career. So this is a very timely subject, and we're delighted to be talking about it. Natalie Canavore, our co-author, is an award-winning corporate communicator, magazine editor, and journalist for the New York Times and numerous business publications. She also leads business communication workshops and is the author of Business Writing for Dummies. Natalie works in New York City and Annapolis, Maryland. Susan Dowell, who is a licensed clinical social worker, is also a psychotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist, specializing in relationship issues and mood disorders. Susan is vice president of the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis and has been training health professionals in clinical hypnosis for more than 20 years. Susan practices in New York City and Westchester County, New York. Welcome, Susan.
I'm glad to be here.
Susan, what inspired you and Natalie Canavore to write this book?
Well, Natalie and I were friends for many years. In fact, we knew each other since we were 4. So we had lots of things to talk about. And Natalie very much impressed me with her discussion about workplace issues. And she works a lot with those kinds of issues with clients. She teaches at university and also has run a lot of workshops. And she suggested that we try to combine our skills together. She thought it would be would be a very interesting thing to teach people methods that they had never learned before. Yes. And it would be a way to help them deal with issues that, in her field, were very challenging.
And Susan, what unique perspectives, given your different backgrounds, do you feel you're each bringing to this book and this subject?
Well, she brings a tremendous amount of wisdom about what the workplace issues are, and she's worked with it in many different hats. And so I really have this, I've gotten a lot of information from her about how to best use the kinds of techniques that I have. And I found that there are many people who come in believing that they can't get past the challenges in a new workplace situation. And using hypnotherapy, we help people to get more in contact with their skills and their wisdom. And so when I was discussing that with her, we decided that would be a very interesting combination.
I remember reading in the very beginning of your book that it mentioned that many of us have the inner resources, we lack the strategies.
Right, that's exactly right.
And that's what we want to talk about right now.
What unique perspectives do you bring in the book? I mean, first of all, I found your book hypnotic, #1. But tell us some of the things that you bring to the book.
Well, I think I bring novelty to the book because a lot of the kinds of techniques that I've suggested are not usually part of the regular routine when people are going for counseling in terms of improving their work issues. I find that using a lot of using the power of the mind to create visualizations, to to access information and wisdom they might not have had known they had available is very powerful and can really make a huge difference when people are wanting to improve work situations or even wanting to get into a new field.
Tell us about visualizations. That's an interesting subject.
Visualizations are the hallmark of what the athletes use in the Olympics. And in fact, they used to do practice all the time, and now, because they realize that it's very difficult to be practicing that much to a lot of the events that they're working with, visualizing themselves do it is one where they can actually activate all the muscles in their body without having to strain them. And they can ski down a mountain all in visualizations, and they can play all kinds of sports all with visualizations and improve. In fact, their performances improve much more rapidly than when they're actually doing the activities.
Can I visualize I'm George Clooney? Would that work?
Absolutely. You can go too.
Joan?
Well, I know that we've talked a little bit about negative self-talk.
Well, I just want to say one more thing about the visualizations, because it's a wonderful way to try out things, to try out new approaches when you're in the workplace without having to actually risk speaking up to your boss when you're not sure how it's going to be working. So I think it's very important and very important strategy, so I just wanted to mention that also.
And is that something that you would practice at home, or how would you begin to do that?
I would want to do it first in my office, or I might ask people. We described it pretty completely in the book. So I think that a lot of people I know have tried it out just from reading the book. But you need to have some understanding. You don't just say, I think I'm going to imagine myself punching my boss in the nose.
That's not the kind of visualization we're looking for. Were there other areas under visualization that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think it's also not only how do you deal with your boss, but how do you deal with yourself, visualizing yourself, being able to be calm in a difficult situation at work, being able to visualizing yourself standing before an audience and presenting and really allowing yourself to go through all of the different emotional experiences that you might in actually doing it, but this time you have the chance to prepare it and to strengthen yourself so that you can walk out feeling as if you've really practiced.
And I imagine that does take practice. That's not going to happen 1, 2, 3.
The practice is not in front of other people, it's with you working with yourself, and that makes a big difference.
Does hypnotherapy play a part in the book?
A lot. A lot of the exercises that we were talking about, role-playing and role reversal, are all hypnotic techniques. And so is visualizations, actually, as well as it is used by athletes.
Learning to manage your emotions and learning to understand the people you work with. That's in the book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we all tend to get riled up in certain situations, and we need tools. In the workplace, there can often be a lot of tension. There's an awful lot of people in the workplace that you may not have chosen as your friends and family, but you have to have close working relationships. So it's very important to use a lot of skills to find ways to work with yourself so that you can deal with challenging co-workers.
Now everybody has a boss they don't particularly like.
Right.
Okay, how do you deal with a boss like that? Are there techniques to make it easier?
Well, yes, I think one of the techniques that we've talked about a lot in the book is role reversal. And in order to really effectively work with somebody who's challenging and difficult, you have to be able to see things from their point of view. You can't just figure out, oh, I have to do what he's saying, because that doesn't necessarily give you enough understanding of what his thinking is. In role reversal, which is one of the things we spend a lot of time discussing, you have the chance to envision yourself as your boss or as your coworker and experience yourself from the other person's point of view. And that really opens a lot of doors and gives you a lot more wisdom into how the person experiences you.
And how would you actually do that? How would that, just through your imagination and thinking
well,
about it? Or?
the way we described it in the book is that we might have 2 chairs. And this is basically how I would work with a client, but some people find it comfortable enough to do on their own. We'd have 2 chairs, and I might start off with, you know, Mr. So-and-so, I really think it's time for me to get a raise. Okay. Then you go over to the other chair, and your boss just heard you say you want a raise, and you feel like you're, who the heck does he think he is asking for a raise? He's only been here 3 days. And so you're thinking all kinds of things about he needs to prove himself, and sitting in that chair, you're giving fellow from over here a bigger wisdom, a clearer wisdom about what it is that he needs to do in order to really successfully convince his boss.
So does that mean that if I were the person, let's say, who wanted the raise, I'd sit in this chair and speak to the empty chair, all the reasons why
You do it back and forth. You start off by saying, I'd like to, it's time for me to get a raise. Let's say
Yes.
that's your position. And you think, I'm going to go in there feeling strong. Well, once you go there and sit in your boss's chair, you hear how outrageous that matter is. You might not feel it over here, but over there, it would become clear that this is not the way to make a good impression on your boss.
Okay.
How do you navigate corporate culture? That's something in your book. How do you handle that?
Well, I think that there's a lot of challenges. There's, you know, the most important thing is to really spend some time understanding what your corporate culture is, and there's a lot of differences in maybe working in a large company that has a very open arrangement for people talking with bosses, and you might move into a company where there's a very strict rules about how you can approach people. So part of it is really educating yourself about the rules in your company and really learning about how to navigate that. It doesn't come naturally because there's a lot of information that you have to get.
And I was thinking too that these days there's so many mergers, so if a company merges, that presents a whole new set of...
And I've seen people who have really struggled with that because they're now working with people who have a whole different set of work ethics than they did.
Absolutely. And how about this subject of negative self-talk? What is that?
That's, I think, one of the most important.
You know what, let's hold that thought. We have a public service announcement coming up.
Okay.
And when we get back, we're going to talk about that. That's a very important thing to talk about. So don't touch that dial. I'll be right back.
Every child needs a place.
A place to call home.
A place where they can play and dream. And dream.
And plan for their future.
In the Habitat house,
my daddy helped build.
I study.
I grow. I learn.
I live. Your support can help
put a decent roof
over the heads of a family like mine.
Like mine. Like mine.
Like mine.
To learn how you can help, visit habitat.org.
Okay, we're back again, and Joan was asking a very important question.
Yes, Susan. Negative self-talk. What is it?
Well, it's a very troubling habit that many people struggle with. You know, you're going into a job interview and it doesn't go quite right, and you say to yourself, boy, was I an idiot? Why did I say that? That was really stupid. How could I not recognize such and such? You're going to a client and you say, why is it I forgot, what's the matter with me? I forgot his title. I mean, I'm really dumb, you know. And you say those things to yourself, and guess what happens? And you start to feel the way you talk to yourself. Negative self-talk becomes a way that you start to believe yourself. It's a very troubling habit that an awful lot of people have. And they don't often realize it. They think they're just speaking the truth to themselves. And I think that one of the things that I found necessary when I work in my office is that I help people to recognize that they are in fact creating the discomfort rather than describing it.
Yes.
How do you do that, Susan? Let's say you have a very bad self-image and you're going, people are against me, the boss hates me. I mean, is there an exercise, you know, or a mindset that you can do to help you overcome those problems?
Well, I think first of all, there's an education that goes with it. I usually explain how you talk to yourself affects how you feel. And we might, if I'm doing it in my office, I might give them some examples to try it out, pay attention to how they feel after they talk to themselves a certain way. But usually I ask people to let themselves remember something in their own life where they recognize that happened. Because once they have things in their own life as a reference, it usually helps them to start to think about how they could have navigated a situation differently. If they had gone in to ask their boss for a raise and they believed ahead of time that they were going to be successful. It doesn't work so good if you go into the office already expecting that you're going to get a no.
That's for sure. Well, I think one of the very helpful things among so many in the book is that there are questions at the end of the chapters, exercises that you're encouraged to practice and go through.
Very important.
And when, for example, even with the subject we're talking about, someone could give an example of negative self-talk and see what they did, how they might have done it differently.
Right, very important.
So I think those are also quite helpful.
I think that just telling people facts and reading the book is not nearly enough because we're unlearning habits. And that's a big part of what's going to make the difference.
What are the most important challenges that individuals face today in the workplace?
Well, you're in very large groups with people that you might not have chosen as friends or neighbors, so that they aren't necessarily people that you would automatically get along with. So you're being challenged to develop valid working relationships with people that you might not really feel comfortable with.
You have to be a psychologist somewhat to measure what these people are thinking and how to cope with that.
Well, I think you have to go in there with an open mind. A psychologist would be doing it from a different reference point. I think the big challenge is that you go in there with an open mind to recognize that these are people that may be thinking differently, and that if you want to work together, you're going to need to be sharing and points of view in a different way. You need to respect what the other person thinks, and if you want your ideas to be respected.
Melting different thoughts together to make a positive.
Yes.
And on top of that, too, there are certainly generational issues today.
So that's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I had to remind myself about these categories, but you may in the same office be working with baby boomers who were born from the mid-40s to the 1960s, Generation Xers, 1961 to 81, and the millennials, 1981 to 2000. So
And each
all
one has
those
a
folks
different
together.
each one has somewhat of a different work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if somebody comes in who's maybe a millennial who thinks they should be promoted a lot faster than somebody who's a Generation Xer, it makes a lot of tension for some people.
And if they are, and therefore others who have been there way longer think, what happened? Why didn't I get that promotion?
Right.
So that brings up, and then different values, I'm sure, expectations.
Yes, it's surprising, I think, that the differences have become much more obvious.
Anyway, this is a great book. It's called Workplace Genie. There's magic in this book, Susan. Magic in this book. And it's Sky Horse Publishing?
Yes.
And how do you get a copy of the book? Are you available on Amazon?
Amazon
where can we go?
Is the best way to get it. I can't remember the name.
Oh, it's okay.
There's BookBub, I think it's called. Or you can also buy it there. And Barnes & Noble, if you order it ahead of time, will be able to get it for you as well.
What was the hardest thing you had to deal with writing the book?
I think collaborating with somebody we had very different information, we wanted to find a way to really integrate it in a manner that would make most sense to the listeners and readers. We've known each other for a long time, so we certainly talked a lot.
Since you were 4 years old, right?
Since we were 4 years
That's a long
old,
time,
yes.
right? That's great.
Especially since I'm 6 now.
That's right, yeah, that's 2
It's
years
2
you've
years.
known her, yes, amazing.
You know, some of the points that I picked up and thought were interesting just to mention is that we all have many selves. And I think if we expect consistency in others when we don't have it in ourselves, on
That's
any
very
given
important
day,
point.
we can be many different people, and perhaps we need to have a bit of more of an open heart that others are feeling the same.
I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's a very important fact, and I think that when you allow yourself to have that openness, you're going to find that the workplace is a much easier environment for you.
Oh, for sure. And then you also mention in the book assessing your supervisor's pros and cons, because we all have pros.
Right. Well, you know, there's a technique that I didn't mention that I think is really interesting, and that is reversing roles with your future self. Because we anticipate a lot more than we know, if that makes sense.
True.
So if in the exercise that we described, you visualize yourself going into the future, meeting your future self, and then asking your future self for advice about some of the problems that you're having. And then reverse roles with your future self and answer them.
I'm sure that can be very effective.
It's very effective. People come up with solutions to problems that they hadn't really let themselves think about in that way before.
It sort of goes back to what we said earlier about we have the inner resources.
Right, and the inner information if we allow ourselves to open the right doors.
One of the things, too, that impressed me was the idea that rather than looking for the why of everything going wrong,
It's the how we can do it differently.
yes,
Big difference. If you're looking at what's wrong, you're looking at how to make it right. And it's a totally different mindset.
that
Very
is
important.
really a different mindset. And then you don't start off with negativity.
Yes. And that really makes it as, if you're starting in the situation expecting that you're going to work it out, but the only difference is that you are going to think through a couple of variations on how to work it out, it's very different than, let me see if I can figure out what to do.
It's true.
I guess the workplace has changed throughout the years. It's different than it was 10, 15 years
Yes,
ago.
I think it was much more formal in those days, and people didn't have the same sense of feeling entitled to speak out the way they do now in the workplace.
So,
And there were some other points about figuring out how the other person is thinking and trying to understand the other person's point of view and the importance of listening. All that, I think,
And
goes together.
that's part of role reversal, so it's really allowing yourself, as I said before, if you want to figure out how to ask your boss for a raise, you may have two empty seats here, sitting first in this chair and thinking, how am I going to ask for the raise? And you try it out, and you reverse roles and sit in that chair and experience how it feels to be asked in that way, and then try it out another way until you find one that you really feel will be acceptable.
So do you feel that your readers will have to practice this? This isn't going to just happen overnight.
No, but it's not as difficult as it might sound. I think it's very easy, once people do it, to get comfortable. Role reversal is basically working with yourself. And as you get comfortable with it, you'll find it becomes a really, really valuable tool in making a lot of decisions.
I guess the critical part is being open.
Being open to yourself and your own creativity and thinking. I think that in order to, the people who are going to like this book are people who recognize that they have the creative capacity to look at different options.
what have you learned about yourself writing this book?
I have learned that becoming an author is a whole new career.
I bet.
And so, there were challenges, a lot of challenges in that, and changing my thinking from the way I've worked with clients.
How did it change?
Well, I think I had many more precise thoughts when I was working in a field where there were certain models for how you work with change. And in working in this way, I began to think it opened my eyes to an expanded number of options. And I think that's enhanced my clinical work.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You know, talking about age groups, I think the older you get, the harder it is to make change. When you're younger, it's a little bit easier. That's right.
I'll just tell you one thing. My dear mother, who lived to almost 101, when she was in her 90s, she used to say to me, "I'm working on that." So I think if you want to.
I think so.
Yes, that sounds great.
You often can, you know.
Very exciting book, Workplace Genie. I mean, I recommend it to all my Nostalgia Alley viewers. And there's a lot to be learned because navigating the workplace, let's face it, is very, very, very difficult. Do you have a closing question?
Do you have a closing thought?
You have 2 minutes.
I just want to thank you for inviting me and for having the opportunity to interact with you and your really challenging questions, and that was very good for my thinking as well.
And I thank you for coming. I know there's a lot of literary teas and parties, and you took the time to come here. Book signings.
Yes,
It's exhausting, right, being an author. It's not
And
easy.
we certainly also want to recognize Natalie Canavore for all of her work. I understand she's the author of a number of the dummy books, so there's lots to learn here for everyone.
Is there a dummy book on how to be a TV host I could use?
You don't need one.
Anyway, I want to thank you so much. And would you do the honor on the air of signing this book for us?
Oh, yes.
Love it.
Oh, that would be lovely.
So I recommend The Genie Workplace. It is a very exciting book because there are so many problems now that people face. It's a whole new generation, it's a whole new workforce, and it changes people's thinking. It makes it a lot easier to navigate the many obstacles that one has.
And to give a lot of promise and hope that there are solutions.
Absolutely. So this is Mike Sobel and
Joan Delaloy.
And
Susan Dowell.
I want to thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again real soon. And this is Mike Sobel saying good night to you, and especially to you.